The hall of the alien tribunal was larger than any building the human had ever seen. Its walls were polished to a reflective black that seemed to swallow the light, and massive pillars stretched high, supporting a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. The air was thick with a low hum of energy, a sound that vibrated in the bones. Rows of alien officials, tall and slender with shimmering skin and piercing eyes, filled the hall, their faces unreadable. At the center, on a raised platform, stood a figure whose presence made even the hardened observers pause. She was the widow. Her name was Lyra, though among her people names carried more weight than mere letters. She had been a leader's mate, someone who once held promise and power, and now she was stripped of both. Her mate had died in a rebellion that failed spectacularly, leaving her alone, shamed, and vulnerable. In her society, widows were symbols of misfortune, and no one wanted to claim her. They called her the lost star behind her back, a title that felt as sharp as any blade. Today, the council intended to make her punishment public, not by killing her, but by doing something far crueler. They were giving her to a human. Humans were considered weak. To the council, they were fragile creatures, soft in mind and body, unable to survive harsh environments without constant care. They were emotional, unpredictable, and insignificant on the galactic scale. Lyra had heard stories of humans from traveling merchants and captives who had once escaped human worlds. She had always believed them to be inferior, pathetic even. But now she was to be bound to one of them, forced to live under his protection, expected to endure humiliation until she learned to accept it. The tribunal's leader, a being named V. Hallex, stepped forward. Its skin shimmered with gold under the hall lights, and its voice was like steel sliding over glass. Lyra of the Urandor line, it said, eyes locking onto her with an intensity that made her knees tremble. For your failure to preserve your mate's legacy, for the shame brought upon your line, the council has decreed your sentence. You will live among humans, bound to one as a companion until your purpose is redefined. Lyra's mind struggled to grasp the weight of the words. Her throat tightened. To live with a human, to be reduced to some pet or burden in the eyes of her own people. The council expected her to cry, to resist, to beg for death. But she said nothing. Silence was her only weapon now. The human arrived moments later. He walked through the hall's entrance without ceremony, a stark contrast to the elaborate procession of the aliens. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an aura of quiet strength. His uniform was simple, designed for function rather than display, and his eyes held a calm that unsettled the alien spectators. The council's intention was clear. They wanted him to see her as a punishment and her to see him as weak. He stopped a few meters away from Lyra and inclined his head slightly. "I am Captain Jerk," he said in a steady voice. "I will escort you." There was no fear, no mockery, no sense of ownership in his tone. Lyra blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. This was not the reaction she expected. She had prepared herself for harsh words, dominance, or ridicule. Instead, he spoke as though it were a routine task, nothing more, nothing less. The tribunal murmured in confusion. A human acting with such composure in their presence was unusual. Most would cower or argue, but this one simply waited, calm and unyielding. V. Hallex's mandibles clicked together, a sound that served as a reprimand to the council, a signal that the human's behavior was unexpected. Lyra was moved toward Jerk, her body tense, every muscle ready to resist. The council's eyes burned into her back, eager to witness her humiliation, but she found herself studying the human instead. There was something about him that was different from what she had imagined. He did not treat her like an object or a prisoner. He treated her like a person, and for reasons she could not name, that small difference unsettled her more than any insult or threat ever could. They left the tribunal hall together, stepping into the human ship that would carry them to the frontier world. The vessel was a marvel of efficiency. not the ornate displays of alien technology she was used to. Lights glowed softly along the walls, panels hummed with energy, and the air was clean and breathable. Jerk guided her to a cabin that would serve as her living space, modest but comfortable. There were no restraints, no chains, no signs of ownership, just a bed, a small table, and a viewport showing the stars outside. "This will be your room," Jerk said, gesturing toward the small space. "You are free to move as you wish. There are dangers outside, but I will keep you safe. That is all." Lyra studied him, suspicion and disbelief warring in her mind. "Safe?" she asked. You do not wish to control me," he shook his head. "Control is not my goal, survival is. We both want the same thing, to live." She could not understand. The humans, she thought, were supposed to be fragile, weak, unworthy of respect. And yet here was one, standing firm, giving her autonomy and speaking with honor. For the first time in many cycles, she did not feel entirely trapped, but she also did not feel comfortable. Trust was not something she could give freely, not after the betrayals and losses she had endured. Days passed aboard the ship. Jerk did not pressure her. He performed his duties, navigating the vessel through asteroid belts and radiation storms, while Lyra observed quietly, learning the intricacies of human technology and life. She was fascinated despite herself. Humans were simple, yes, but there was an ingenuity in their methods, a stubbornness that allowed them to survive where more advanced species might fail. One evening, as the ship drifted past a glowing nebula, Lyra found herself on the observation deck, staring at the swirling colors of gas and light. Jerk joined her, leaning against the railing silently. "You never asked why they sent you to me," he said softly. "I do not need to ask," Lyra replied. "It is punishment. They expected me to suffer." "Maybe they underestimated you," Jerk said, watching her reflection in the glass. "Or maybe they underestimated humans. Sometimes people surprise others." Lyra looked at him sharply. His calm confidence, the way he spoke as if danger could be met with patience instead of panic, intrigued her. But it also scared her. The Council had designed this as a punishment. If she allowed herself to admire him, to depend on him even slightly, would that be another failure in their eyes? The journey to the frontier world was long, and danger was never far. Raiders, space storms, and hostile environments tested them constantly. Each time, Jerk met the challenges with resilience, never abandoning his duties, never expecting Lyra to act beyond her strength. Slowly, her perception of humans shifted. They were not weak. They were not insignificant. They endured, adapted, and persevered where others might crumble. Lyra began to realize something profound. The punishment the Council had designed was failing already. She was learning strength from a species she had been taught to despise. The human soldier, whom she had expected to be a burden, was becoming something entirely different. A teacher, a protector, and unwittingly a symbol of hope. The day they arrived on the frontier world, Lyra stood on the landing platform, looking at the barren, rocky landscape stretching for miles. Wind whipped against her face, carrying the scent of iron and dust. Jerk's ship had landed without ceremony, and the alien council would not be here to watch their punishment unfold. Here, there were no expectations, only survival. As they stepped onto the planet, Lyra felt a strange sense of liberation. She was still a widow. She was still alone by the standards of her species. But for the first time, she felt the possibility of choice. The human beside her did not demand obedience. He did not expect gratitude or submission. He only expected perseverance, and he offered the same in return. That night, as the twin moons rose over the rocky horizon, Lyra sat outside their temporary shelter. Jerk was nearby, repairing equipment, his movements calm and deliberate. She allowed herself a rare thought. Perhaps the council had made a mistake. Perhaps in sentencing her to a human, they had not broken her. They had given her a chance to discover something entirely new. The first part of her journey, meant to be her greatest humiliation, had already begun to teach her a different lesson. Strength was not always found in power or status. Sometimes it was found in resilience, in loyalty, and in the quiet courage of an unexpected ally. And as Lyra watched the human soldier under the alien moons, she began to understand that this punishment might not be the end of her story, but the beginning of something far greater than she had ever imagined. Life on the frontier world was harsher than Lyra had ever imagined. The wind tore across the rocky plains with a force that bent the few hardy trees and kicked up clouds of red dust. Sunlight burned harshly during the day, and at night, the temperature dropped so low that even her alien physiology shivered. The humans here had adapted, their skin toughened, their minds disciplined by years of survival in unforgiving terrain. Jerk moved easily through this harsh world, every step precise and confident, while Lyra struggled to keep pace. At first she had assumed she would resent the human soldier, this creature she was forced to live with. Her own people had left her to despair, their eyes full of contempt, their words full of blame. But Jerk did not treat her like a failure or a burden. He offered guidance, patience, and protection without asking anything in return. Slowly, that patience began to break down the walls she had built around herself. She was still wary, still cautious, but a spark of curiosity flickered where fear had once lived. The first major test came sooner than either of them expected. While surveying a nearby canyon for resources, they spotted a group of raiders moving toward them, aliens with jagged weapons and sleek, predatory ships that skimmed just above the ground. Lyra froze, instinct urging her to run, but she remembered Jerk's words. Survival depended on calm, not panic. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice steady. "Do exactly what I do." Lyra did as he instructed. They moved through the rough terrain together, Jerk taking the lead, assessing the raiders' positions and finding paths that would keep them partially hidden. His knowledge of the land, his ability to predict danger, and his calm under pressure amazed her. The humans were not weak. They endured, adapted, and used their environment in ways that alien soldiers, trained in brute force and advanced technology, often overlooked. The raiders soon noticed them, and a skirmish began. Laser beams and plasma bolts streaked across the canyon, hitting rocks and sending sparks into the air. Jerk moved with calculated precision, using the terrain for cover, keeping Lyra protected. When one raider broke through their concealment, he tackled it, using his strength and quick reflexes to disable it without killing it unnecessarily. Lyra felt a rush of something she hadn't expected, admiration, respect, and she admitted quietly to herself, a sense of trust. She realized she could rely on this human in ways she could never have relied on her own people. The fight was brief, and when it ended, the raiders retreated, confused and frustrated. Lyra's heart was still racing, but she felt a strange thrill. They had survived, together. After the skirmish, Jerk tended to her minor scratches while she watched silently. He did not speak condescendingly or expect her gratitude. His touch was careful, his movements efficient. "You are learning quickly," he said. "Your reflexes, your instincts, they are strong. You only need to trust them." Lyra wanted to argue, to say she had survived because she was careful, because she was smart, but she knew the truth. Jerk's guidance, his patience, and his belief in her had made the difference. She felt a small warmth of pride she hadn't felt in cycles. Days passed, and their routine continued. They explored the frontier, scavenged for resources, repaired equipment, and fortified their small shelter against storms and hostile wildlife. Lyra began to understand the humans in a deeper way. They were not graceful or elegant like her own people, but they had something more enduring, resilience. Where others might collapse under pressure, humans endured. Where others might be rigid in thought, humans adapted. Where others might rule through fear, humans built trust through action. One evening, as the twin moons of the planet rose, Lyra noticed movement in the distant canyon. Alien agents had come, spies, sent by the council to ensure their punishment was unfolding as intended. They were here to provoke, to test the human, to see if he would fail or break the widow's spirit. Lyra froze. "They are here because of me," she whispered. Jarek didn't look at her with anger or fear. He simply nodded. "We expected them. Stay close." The aliens moved swiftly, their ships hovering, their weapons aimed. But Jarek's strategy was clear. He used the terrain to his advantage, setting traps, drawing the attackers into positions where their superior technology became a liability. Lyra watched, astonished, as this human, whom her people considered weak and disposable, outmaneuvered seasoned alien soldiers. When the confrontation reached its peak, one of the alien leaders demanded that Lyra be taken back. It was a test, a cruel reminder that she was meant to be humiliated, to fail, to regret every step she had taken with a human. But Jarek did not yield. He stood between her and the alien, his posture unshakable, his calm aura radiating strength. "She is not yours," he said simply. "You cannot take what she has chosen to keep." Lyra felt something stir inside her. For the first time, she did not feel like a pawn or a victim. She felt agency, a small but powerful freedom. She had been given to a human as punishment, but in the face of danger, that human had become her shield, her protector, her anchor. She realized she had begun to care, not out of obligation, but by choice. The Alien Council's agents withdrew, confused and frustrated. They had expected her to be broken, but they underestimated two things: human resilience and the bond that had formed between them. Lyra looked at Jarek, seeing him in a new light. The soldiers of her species had trained for centuries, yet here was a human, unassuming and unremarkable by appearance, who possessed a strength they could not comprehend. In the days that followed, Lyra began to change. She trained alongside Jarek, learning how to survive the harsh landscape, how to repair equipment, how to move silently through dangerous territory. Each lesson was a small victory. Each obstacle overcome was proof that humans were not the weak creatures she had been taught to despise. One night, a massive storm hit the frontier. Winds howled like beasts, tearing at their shelter and hurling debris through the air. Lyra panicked at first, fear gripping her chest, but Jarek's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Focus. Protect what you can. Do not fight the wind, work with it." They secured their shelter together, holding walls and equipment against the relentless force. Lyra felt exhaustion in every fiber of her being, yet she also felt exhilaration. Humans were not invincible, but they endured. They adapted. They fought, not with arrogance or power, but with patience, intelligence, and determination. As the storm passed, Lyra looked around at the damage. Their shelter had survived. They had survived. And for the first time she felt hope, not for herself, but for the life she could build here, alongside a human who had become more than a protector. He was a partner, a teacher, and perhaps, though she did not admit it yet, something even more profound. The Alien Council's plan had failed spectacularly. The punishment meant to break her had instead awakened a new understanding of strength. Lyra realized that survival was not about dominance or fear. It was about loyalty, courage, and resilience, the very qualities humans excelled in. She began to see Jarek not as a human, not as a lesser creature, but as a symbol of what her life could become. Together they faced the dangers of the frontier world, built trust and skill, and discovered the unexpected truth. Sometimes, those who seem weakest are the strongest. And though she did not speak it aloud, Lyra felt a quiet thrill at the thought that the human soldier beside her, this simple, steadfast being, was no longer merely a part of her punishment. He had become something far greater, a treasure she had never expected to find, a force she could rely on, and perhaps in time the greatest ally she could ever know. The days rolled on, each one bringing new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities for Lyra to grow. She was no longer simply a widow given to a human as punishment. She was learning to be a survivor, to be strong, and to embrace the unexpected bond forming between her and the human soldier. And as the twin moons rose again over the rocky plains, casting long shadows across the land, Lyra made a quiet vow to herself. She would endure, she would adapt, she would survive, and if the council wished to see her broken, they would be sorely disappointed. For the first time in cycles, Lyra felt not fear, but purpose, and she knew that with Jerk beside her, she could face whatever the galaxy had in store. Life on the frontier world had changed Lyra in ways she could not have imagined. The widow who had arrived in Jerk's care was no longer fragile or timid. Her movements were confident, her decisions decisive, and her mind sharp. Each challenge had forged her, each danger had strengthened her resolve. And throughout it all, Jerk had been beside her, unwavering, calm, and steady. A human she had once underestimated, now her greatest ally. The alien council, however, was far from pleased. They had sent their agents to monitor her progress, and the news that Lyra had adapted, survived, and even thrived with a human shocked them. In their view, she had failed to accept humiliation, defied expectation, and displayed the dangerous capability of independent thought. It was unacceptable. They decided to act directly. A fleet of sleek alien warships appeared in orbit above the frontier world, cutting through the atmosphere with precision. Their intent was clear: reclaim Lyra, demonstrate human weakness, and restore the Council's authority. Jerk noticed the approaching fleet first. "They are coming," he said, scanning the skies. His voice was calm but firm. "Prepare yourself. They do not expect us to resist, but we will." Lyra's pulse quickened, but she did not falter. She had faced raiders, storms, and harsh terrain. She had learned to move silently, strike decisively, and think strategically. "We will fight," she said simply. The aliens landed in the rocky plains, deploying troops and advanced weaponry. Their aim was to intimidate, to crush morale, to take Lyra by force. But humans, and Lyra had learned this firsthand, never gave up so easily. Jerk moved quickly, positioning their small team of frontier defenders, using the natural terrain to their advantage. Lyra followed, coordinating with him, giving orders with clarity and precision. Her knowledge of alien tactics, combined with Jerk's human ingenuity, created an unexpected synergy. The first clash was intense. Laser fire streaked across the battlefield, and the ground shook under the weight of alien machinery. Lyra stayed close to Jerk, moving as one with him. She had learned not only survival but combat, strategy, and trust. When an alien soldier charged toward them, she intercepted, using a combination of agility and precise strikes she had practiced for weeks. Jerk covered her back, his aim true and unwavering. Together, they were not two beings but a single force. The aliens were shocked. They expected an easy victory, but these humans, and this widow, moved with coordination, intelligence, and courage that defied their expectations. Lyra's sharp mind found weak points in the alien formations, relayed strategies to Jerk, and even directed other human fighters. Her leadership shone, born from necessity, strengthened by hardship, and tempered by the lessons she had learned from the human soldier. The battle continued through the day. The humans on the frontier were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were not defeated. Lyra and Jerk moved like shadows through the battlefield, striking where the aliens were weakest, defending civilians, and inspiring courage in others. Every time the aliens thought they had the upper hand, Lyra's quick thinking and Jerk's calm leadership turned the tide. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in red and gold, the alien commanders realized that their superior technology was not enough. Human adaptability, resilience, and determination were forces they had underestimated. Lyra's presence, her intelligence, and her courage amplified those forces. She was no longer a mere pawn, no longer a symbol of weakness or punishment. She was a leader, a strategist, and a fighter who inspired humans to rise above fear. The Council's flagship attempted a final strike, aiming directly at Jerk and Lyra. But the humans anticipated it. Using a combination of terrain manipulation, improvised traps, and sheer bravery, they intercepted the strike, turning the alien attack against themselves. The flagship suffered severe damage, and the alien fleet was forced to retreat. In the aftermath, Lyra stood among the human fighters, the wind carrying the scent of dust, metal, and smoke. She looked at Jerk, his uniform tattered, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes calm and unwavering. She felt an overwhelming sense of respect, gratitude, and something deeper she had yet to name. "You were incredible," she said quietly. Jerk shook his head. "No. You were incredible. I guided you, yes, but every decision, every move, every choice came from you. You survived because you learned, adapted, and trusted yourself." Lyra realized he was right. Her growth, her courage, her ability to lead and fight had not been handed to her. She had earned it, forged it through trials, and strengthened it with experience. The human soldier had only given her the opportunity to see her own strength and to harness it. In the days that followed, the frontier world slowly returned to calm. The Alien Council, humiliated by their failure, withdrew from the system. Their spies reported not a broken widow, but a human-led alliance with a sharp-minded alien strategist who had turned their punishment into a victory. Humanity had won respect, and Lyra had won freedom. The bonds between her and Jerk deepened. They worked side by side, exploring the frontier, building shelters, training new settlers, and defending against threats. Lyra no longer felt the weight of shame or loss. She had been given to a human as punishment, but in truth, she had gained a partner, an equal, and a friend who had taught her the value of trust, loyalty, and courage. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the rocky plains, Lyra reflected on the journey. The widow she had been was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and alive in ways she had never imagined. The human beside her was no longer just a soldier or a guardian. He was her ally, her teacher, her protector, and perhaps, quietly, something far more profound. Jerk looked at her, sensing her thoughts. "We've come far," he said, "and there's more ahead, but together we can face anything." Lyra nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Yes, together." In that moment, she understood something fundamental about humans, and perhaps about herself. Strength was not defined by status, lineage, or power. It was defined by endurance, courage, loyalty, and the ability to rise above fear. It was in standing beside someone, not above them. It was in choosing to fight to survive and to protect what mattered. The council had tried to punish her, to strip her of hope, to bind her to a human as a symbol of disgrace. But they had failed. Lyra had not only survived, she had flourished. She had learned the power of human resilience, the strength of choice, and the value of companionship. She had turned punishment into opportunity, fear into courage, and a sentence into triumph. And as the frontier wind carried the scent of new beginnings across the rocky plains, Lyra realized that the greatest treasure she had found was not her survival, nor even the victories against the Alien Council. It was the human beside her, who had taught her what strength truly meant, and who had, without knowing it, given her the freedom to become her true self. In the years that followed, the frontier became a symbol of hope. Human settlers arrived, inspired by tales of the widow and the human soldier who had faced overwhelming odds and prevailed. Lyra led, taught, and fought alongside them, her skills and intelligence shaping the new world. And always Jerk was beside her, not as a master, not as a captor, but as a partner who respected her choices, her courage, and her spirit. Together, they built a life that neither punishment nor fear could destroy. The Alien Council's attempts to humiliate had backfired spectacularly. They had not created a broken widow, they had forged a hero, a strategist, and a symbol of human and alien cooperation. Lyra stood one evening on a cliff overlooking the frontier settlement. The moons reflected in her eyes, and she felt a sense of calm she had never known. Beside her, Jerk stood silently, scanning the horizon. They had faced death, danger, and betrayal, but they had endured. They had survived. And they had discovered something far more valuable than vengeance or honor: trust, respect, and the unbreakable bond forged between two beings from different worlds. Lyra turned to Jerk, her voice soft but resolute. "We've faced the impossible, and we are still here. Together we are stronger than they ever imagined." Jerk smiled faintly, a spark of pride in his eyes. "Stronger than anyone, and this is only the beginning." The wind blew across the frontier, carrying the promise of new challenges, new victories, and new adventures. Lyra felt a surge of determination and hope. She was no longer the widow given as punishment. She was a survivor, a leader, and a symbol of the strength that could come when humans and aliens chose trust, courage, and unity over fear and control. And as the stars shimmered in the night sky, Lyra knew that the greatest treasure she had found was not just survival, not just victory. It was the human soldier who had walked beside her, who had taught her to trust, to fight, and to believe. Together they would face whatever the galaxy had in store, unyielding, unstoppable, and stronger than anyone could imagine. The punishment had failed. Humanity had triumphed, and Lyra had found a treasure beyond measure.